Hello everybody, it's Josie here. I'm doing I suppose a bit of a wrap up for 3 of the books that I've read this month. So this month is Pride Month, June. I've been taking part in the Queer Lit Readathon. I'm kind of dedicated to reading all things queer and pride related this month. But having said that, I have read these 3 books specifically that didn't fit in with that theme. Now, 2 of them I thought did. So I think as a bit of an aside, before I talk about these books, I will say that what I've noticed recently, and I don't know if anybody else has noticed that, is that when I'm reading reviews and blurbs and things and descriptions on books, I find that a lot of the reviews or the blurbs will say that there is, great diversity, whether it be representation in the LGBTQIA plus arena, whether there be representation in cultural diversity, color, background, religion, that kind of thing. So I find a lot of books that now say, sort of bill themselves as diverse, which is what I'm looking for, and I know what a lot of people are looking for. But then when I read the book, I find that maybe my definition of something that's got great diversity in it is very different from whoever wrote that, because there might be a really tiny peripheral side character somewhere that may be a person of color or someone that's queer, but it won't have anything really to do with the main storyline. Or there'll be like one moment or scene or instant that you could maybe ascribe to being queer. So I sometimes feel like it might be put in some of the descriptions as almost, I hate us to say it, but sort of baity, almost like, oh, if we put this in here, people will want to pick it up and read it because people are looking for diverse literature. And actually, when you read the book, you find out it's not as diverse as you thought. So it's a bit of an aside, but it is something that I've kind of noticed more recently, and it bugs me a little bit. So personally, I'm going to be a bit more careful and maybe do a bit more research and do more proofreading now, to actually make sure that the things I'm picking up that I think are going to be diverse are properly, at least what my definition of diversity is. So having said all that, these books are still good, so I'm going to talk about them and review them. So the first one I've got here, so this one does not fall into the category where I actually thought there was diversity. I knew what I was getting with this one, is After the Fire by Will Hill, and this is the one that matches my outfit, because out of these 3, this was definitely my favorite book. So this book is about Moonbeam, who has basically grown up in a cult in America. And it was kind of a religious cult, and it became extremely kind of doomsday religious. And what I like about this book is it doesn't actually focus, or it starts where the government pretty much is raiding their compound, and chaos ensues, and Moonbeam and some of the children are some of the only survivors of this the kind of shootout between law enforcement and the members of this cult. And this book kind of what I like about it is you've got Moonbeam and some of these other young children, and they've obviously been rescued. They've been put in a hospital, kind of a secure psychiatric unit, obviously for observation. And just talking to them, you've got the doctor. The story mainly focuses on the doctor talking to Moonbeam, the doctor, and then the FBI agent comes in as well. And she's kind of telling her story. So you kind of almost see it backwards. You know what's happened. And the fire alludes to, so after the fire, and it alludes to that incident. But then the story is almost told backwards of her journey to that raid and getting there, and how she feels about the cult now, then, their stories. It is fascinating. I thought it was really, really good. I love, sounds terrible, but I do love anything cult related. Read a few books around sort of the Manson cult, found that incredibly fascinating, have some more books actually to read about that. So anything kind of, I find that mentality, I find it really interesting, how people get pulled into cults, how these cult leaders really program and kind of brainwash people into thinking their way. I find it fascinating. There are some sort of hard scenes to read, so not necessarily, there is a sexual assault that takes place. There's, as with a lot of these cults, the kind of question of taking brides within the cult comes up. But I just think it's a fascinating exploration. And also that idea of what you've been taught all your life to believe, and then deprogramming that, and then not having your own thoughts and your own opinions, and then feeling like that's wrong because all your life you've been told to just blindly follow someone else's thoughts and feelings. I thought this was really well done. I would 4 stars, maybe even 4.5. I really liked it. I mean, enjoyed it in the sense that I thought it was really thought-provoking, and I liked the style of it and the way it focused on the sort of surviving children rather than kind of throwing you into the cult, but seeing it from their perspective and seeing it afterwards and the way it was told. I thought it was really, really good. So that was definitely my favorite out of these books. Really, really good book. I do recommend if you like that kind of thing. Then the next 2 books fall under the category that I was speaking about earlier, was ones that I thought were going to fall under the kind of queer umbrella, but they didn't. So the first one is this one over here, Poison Tree by Erin Kelly. So this one focuses on 2 women at college university, which again is something that I feel like we don't see that much, and I actively look for kind of university age books as well. I quite like that. I think that period in someone's life is really interesting to read about, so I like that. So they're at university, and so the main character, I'm actually trying to remember what her, Karen. So Karen is very much kind of straight-laced, straight-A student, and she meets Bieber, who is a aspiring actress, and she's very bohemian. And Bieber and her brother live in this it's all set in the UK, live in this kind of gorgeous townhouse that looks like a hippie commune on the inside. And Karen becomes very quickly quite obsessed with Bieber and her life and how they live and kind of her free-spiritedness. And she spends a summer with them. Now, it kind of, sort of on the blurbs and stuff, it says that, you know, they have this intense connection and it's a summer of love. It's not love between the 2 of them, let me just say that. So there is, yeah. So between the 2 of them, that's purely a friendship. But things, I'm not going to say too much more of the story because this actually turns into a bit of a thriller mystery type book, where, you know, you're leading up to some events, something happens. So you see Karen, she talks about her life back then with Bieber and these kind of cast of characters there, and then her life now. And so then you find out in the end how that all ties together, and it is a bit of a kind of a mystery thriller element to it. I enjoyed it. It wasn't the best kind of thriller mystery. It was probably a bit too slow to be an amazing thriller. There were some kind of plot twists and turns, particularly one right at the end that I quite liked, that I didn't necessarily see coming, or something that Karen does that I didn't necessarily see her doing. So I like that. It was good. It wasn't fantastic. So I would say 3, maybe even 3.5. I mean, you see these things in front that say terrific suspense. I don't know if it was that suspense. I don't know, maybe it was just me. It was good, but it wasn't, oh my God, this is the most suspenseful, best thriller I've ever read. It's kind of my thoughts on that one. And then the last one is Innocence and Others by Dana Spiotta. Now, this one was another one that I thought was queer. So again, the blurb on the back basically says you've got 2 women. One who is a kind of, she makes quite feminist documentaries, really hard-hitting documentaries, and the other one makes more kind of feminist but commercial films. And what I will say about this book, so before I say that, so there it talks about their kind of friendship, and then when you read the blurb, it says that they meet another woman who basically she phones up men and she almost has relationships with them, but just over the phone. And they kind of say, oh, you know, it's they meet, and that's kind of, if you read the blurb, it feels like that's going to be a cataclysmic shift in the relationship, or some like major point in their storyline. What I will say is that I didn't feel that way. First of all, that happens really late into the book. And I don't think it has the fallout for me that was like, oh my God, this is just, it just didn't have the fallout that it kind of describes in the blurb, if I'm honest. The other thing I would say about this book is that it does focus very heavily on filmmaking and how films are made, techniques, thoughts behind it. It references filmmakers, it references films that have been made in the past, because they are film students when this starts. And if you're not into that, you will find that boring. I found it interesting because I find that kind of techniques and the thoughts and how, you know, people create films and what they choose to focus on interesting. But if you don't find that interesting, there are a lot of pages of that description. There is a lot of talk about other films, about filmmakers. The relationship between the two women is interesting. They're supposed to be like almost best friends, but one of them is really quite selfish. She really only focuses in on herself. She doesn't even go and watches her friend's films, where her friend always goes to see hers. So there's this interesting kind of comment on friendship and sometimes the inequality and that kind of real. And maybe a lot of filmmakers do this, is that they are quite selfish and they very much focus on themselves and they're really only interested in themselves and their own kind of world. And then you get these bits that are interspersed between the third woman's kind of life, and there's bits that I didn't really get that sort of leads up to her, well, not that I didn't get them, but it kind of leads up to her being this kind of woman that phones up men and talks to them. So I thought it was going to be like a phone sex operator, and she isn't. She just literally dials numbers and it becomes famous men, again, filmmakers, and she starts talking to them, and then of course it turns into, well, can I see your picture? And there's bits around that, but I don't know. I've had some distance from this book, and I'm still not 100% sure how I feel about it. It did make me think, I guess, in certain parts, like I said, about friendship, about, again, also about the nature of how we connect with people, you know, whether it be like over the phone like that. So there are bits that made me think. I found some of the film bits good, but I think this one suffers from a case of, I thought I was going to get one thing and I got something different. It just didn't live up to what I thought it was going to be. So again, I would say 3 stars on this. It's by no means a bad book, but it just isn't what I thought it would be. And frankly, I don't think it really is what it describes on the back. So if you have a love of filmmaking, then this would be an interesting book for you. But I don't necessarily think it's for everyone, which is my opinion. So anyway, those are the 3 books. I hope you enjoyed that. I will speak to you all again very soon. Have a wonderful day, and bye-bye.